Welcome to History Corner.
Andersonville, the tragic legacy of the Civil War's most notorious prison. In the annals of the American Civil War, the name Andersonville has become synonymous with unspeakable suffering, deprivation, and inhumanity. Located in southwest Georgia, the Confederate prison camp, known as Andersonville or Camp Sumter, was a place where thousands of Union prisoners of war endured unimaginable horrors, their lives sacrificed on the altar of a bitter and protracted conflict. Established in February 1864, Andersonville was intended to alleviate overcrowding in other Confederate prison camps and serve as a centralized location for housing captured enemy soldiers. However, what began as a practical solution quickly descended into a living nightmare, as inadequate resources, poor planning, and deliberate neglect transformed the camp into a cesspool of disease, starvation, and death. From the outset, Andersonville was plagued by problems that foreshadowed the tragic events to come. The chosen site lacked adequate shelter, sanitation, and access to fresh water. The Confederate authorities failed to allocate sufficient resources or manpower to maintain the camp properly. As Union prisoners arrived in droves, the camp became severely overcrowded, with over 30,000 men crammed into the small stockade area designed for just 10,000. Living quarters were crude shelters, and sanitation was virtually non-existent, with open trenches serving as makeshift latrines, breeding grounds for disease. Food and water were perpetually scarce, with rations of cornmeal, spoiled meat, and contaminated stream water. Malnutrition and starvation were rampant. Amidst the chaos, a sinister force emerged, the Raiders, or Andersonville Gang, a ruthless group of criminals who terrorized their fellow prisoners. Led by Charles Curtis, a former member of the notorious Shelton Brothers Gang, the Raiders exploited the camp's lawlessness to establish a reign of fear and violence. The gang controlled the illicit trade in food, clothing, and resources, operating a sophisticated black market. Prisoners who refused their demands were brutally beaten, robbed, or murdered. The authorities turned a blind eye, allowing the Raiders to create a camp within a camp where their brutal code reigned supreme. Disease became Andersonville's most relentless enemy. Dysentery, scurvy, malaria, and other illnesses ravaged the prisoner population. The Andersonville diarrhea was particularly deadly. Inadequate medical facilities and the lack of sanitation fueled the spread of sickness. The camp's dead house became a grim testament to the rising death toll, with bodies of those who succumbed to disease, starvation, or Raider violence piled up daily, awaiting burial. While the harsh conditions were exacerbated by war's demands, Andersonville's legacy is tainted by allegations of deliberate cruelty and neglect by its commanders and guards. Captain Henry Wirtz, the camp's commandant, was notorious for his rigid discipline and harsh treatment of prisoners. His failure to address the camp's deficiencies and the Raiders' activities was seen as deliberate neglect and cruelty. After the war, Wirtz was tried by a military tribunal and found guilty of conspiring to injure the health and lives of soldiers and inflicting cruel and unusual punishment. He was executed, the only Confederate official tried and executed for war crimes related to prisoner treatment. As the Raiders' reign of terror continued unchecked, a group of prisoners banded together to seek justice and take a stand against the gang's depravity. In a daring move, these prisoners organized a makeshift court-martial within the camp, determined to hold the Raiders accountable for their crimes. 6 of the most notorious Raiders, Charles Curtis, John Saunders, John W. Gracie, Albert St. Vrain Bayliss, John F. Dyke, and Alexander Lewis, were put on trial, accused of a litany of offenses, including murder, robbery, assault, and conspiracy. The trial, which took place in the summer of 1864, was a remarkable feat of defiance and resilience in the face of unimaginable adversity. Prisoners acted as prosecutors, defense counsel, and jurors, conducting the proceedings with a sense of order and due process that stood in stark contrast to the lawlessness that had gripped the camp. Despite threats and intimidation from the Raiders and their sympathizers, the prisoner-led tribunal heard testimony from witnesses and survivors, meticulously documenting the gang's crimes and the atmosphere of terror they had created within Andersonville. After deliberations, the jury found all 6 defendants guilty of the charges leveled against them. In a symbolic act of justice, the Raiders were sentenced to death by hanging, a sentence that would ultimately be carried out by Union authorities after the camp's liberation. When Andersonville finally closed its gates in May 1865, the staggering toll was laid bare. Of the approximately 45,000 Union prisoners, nearly 13,000 had perished, a mortality rate of nearly 30%. The rows of numbered graves in the camp's cemetery served as a grim memorial. In the years that followed, Andersonville became a symbol of the Civil War's immense human cost and the depths of suffering endured by those caught in its grasp. The camp's legacy has been preserved through historians' efforts, survivors' accounts, and the Andersonville National Historic Site established in 1970. The historic site serves as a poignant reminder of the atrocities within Andersonville's walls. Visitors can walk the grounds, view remnants of the stockade and structures, and pay respect to those who perished. The museum offers an unflinching look at the camp's history, including exhibits on the raiders' trial within the camp and the subsequent military tribunals that brought them to justice. Beyond its historical significance, Andersonville stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the will to survive unimaginable hardship. The stories of those who endured the camp's horrors, including the brave prisoners who dared to hold the raiders accountable, offer a glimmer of hope and humanity amidst the darkness. The legacy of Andersonville is complex and haunting, a reminder of human cruelty and suffering, but also a testament to enduring strength. As we reflect on this tragic chapter, we are compelled to honor the memory of those who perished, condemn the actions of perpetrators like the raiders, and strive for a future where such atrocities are never repeated. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories from history. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you next time.